Hello. Thank you everyone for coming. We are here at Canva Create to talk about data storytelling and the strategy of visual storytelling. So before we get into that, let's do some introductions.
So my name is Kawasaki, and I am the chief evangelist of Canva. I'm also the host of the Remarkable People podcast, and I'm the author of a new book called Think Remarkable. And let's just say that I have given thousands of speeches, and I try to integrate storytelling into every speech. And so I'm here with Duncan because he's an expert in storytelling and visual use of data for stories. And that's a skill I think is so valuable. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Guy. Just to introduce myself, I started out as a journalist and publisher telling data stories in print, and that led to doing lots of bespoke data storytelling for the web, which led to the creation of a tool to try and democratize data storytelling. And that tool was Flourish, which got some fans over there. I'd like to see that. And Flourish set out to bring data to life in an animated, interactive, engaging way. And then a couple of years ago, we were acquired by Canva, so we've now made it so that anything you can create in Flourish goes neatly into Canva, which unlocks a whole world of beautiful data storytelling. But to come back to you guys, so what I'd love to hear from you is what categories of things would you like to be able to do with data storytelling?
Well, let me tell you a story before I tell you that. So I've been in Silicon Valley for about 40 years, and one of my roles was as a venture capitalist. So I listened to literally thousands of pitches, and I'm going to violate all HIPAA rules and tell you that I am deaf, and I use a cochlear implant. And I think the reason why I became deaf was because of all the shitty pitches I listened to. And so that's why storytelling is so important to me. And I figured out 3 basic categories that I always have to use stories. And I would like the people who pitch me to also use stories, because I'm so sick of their hockey stick charts and their Excel spreadsheets and all the bullshit that caused me to go deaf. So let's Daniel Kahneman, by the way. Daniel Kahneman is a world-famous psychologist. He recently passed away, and if you ever heard of the term behavioral economics, that's Daniel Kahneman. He is the man. Nobel Prize winner. He's the man. So the next slide. These are the 3 categories that I asked Duncan to address because they can best be done with data visualization, and Duncan is the man. So it's spreadsheet to story, which is part of every pitch. And then there's these charts, and how do you make a chart into a good story? And finally, there's so much data, there's so many ways to cut things. It's so much better if people could write their own story with the existing data set. So I brought on the world's expert in how to do these 3 things so that we can all be better storytellers.
Okay, well, let's start with the first one. So spreadsheet to story. So we live in a world where data is everywhere. Data is produced in an exponentially growing quantity by pretty well everything we do.
I don't want to block your chart.
150 zettabytes of information in the world. That's a billion thousand. And so everything we do on the internet creates data. So here's an example. This is a spreadsheet from a data set which you are all part of. So this is actually a list of attendees at Canva Create. And of course, in the old days, you would have gone to an event, bought a ticket at the desk and moved on. But now, even just registering for something creates a data set. But this data set, as you can see, is not something that you can really make much sense of. So what I did is I took that data set, this was last night, and I opened one of our templates for visualizing groups of individuals. This one's called the survey template. And I dropped in that data set. You can see this going in here. There's the registrations. Let that do its thing. And then what we're left with is the beginning of a visualization. But of course, that's very different from a story. So let's see how that ended up right in a Canva deck. So here we are. Here you all are, should I say. Each one of these dots represents one of the attendees at the conference. So let's have some fun with this. Move them around. So we can see immediately who's here. We see we've got a very sort of senior audience, lots of C-levels, business owners, directors, and executives. We can break that by the kind of roles that people have. Obviously, a very big presence from marketing there, PR and comms. We can cut it by the size of company that you're all from, and we see that the largest category is actually the enterprise category, 2,000 plus people. No surprise if we group by location, the US is dominant given that we're here in the US, but they're a good show from lots of other countries too. We could even animate that onto a map. And so this is what we mean when we say spreadsheet to story, taking a data set and quickly turning it into something that is more like a narrative with insights. Of course, there's lots of different ways to visualize any given data set. So I just tried another one as well. So here's what we call the hierarchy template, where you can drop in data and this time have it grouped. So we're going to group it here by, for example, the department and the seniority. And then that's going to create another view of the same data. And you can see how rich this looks. We can then move between the different types of visualization type. And again, what results is an interactive visualization and story right in a Canva deck. So here we are with all those groupings in circles. We can zoom in, capture that view, look at the design contingent, zoom into sales success, and we can see right down to an individual from Japan there in the VP category. So again, a quick example of going from a spreadsheet to a story.
I mean, think about it. Can you imagine if you had all that data in a spreadsheet and you're in some kind of staff meeting, right? And the other people in the staff, maybe they put up a bar chart or maybe they put up a pie chart, but if you come up with your Canva visualization and you're cutting and slicing the data, I guarantee you, you'll get the promotion. I guarantee you.
So let's come to the second one. Tell us a bit about this one guy.
Yeah, so listen, every stinking entrepreneur I have ever met puts up a chart that is hockey stick. We are going to achieve worldwide domination in 5 years. We're going to be the biggest tech company in the history of mankind. We're going to make Apple look like a little 7-Eleven Blockbuster store. And after a while, if you hear enough of those stories, you actually go deaf. I know this for a fact. So I asked Duncan, how can I make a chart much more compelling? I don't just want one flat chart that goes hockey stick to the right. Like, give me the most Steve Jobs, reality distortion, evangelistic way to present the chart. And Duncan is going to do that.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
I've got a couple of examples here, and the theme here is a simple chart brought to life. And of course, there's nothing wrong with a simple chart. Charts often work really well, just telling a story in a very clean, concise way. But since this is about data storytelling and bringing things to life, I'm going to give a few examples of how that can be done. So here's an example, a real example from Canva. And Canva's growth, we've seen on the charts even today in the keynote, has been astonishing with this compounding growth, which is a classic exponential curve. You get exponential curves when you have a feedback loop. You've got people using Canva, loving Canva, telling other people to use Canva, and that growing out from there. You can see that on a chart. But to really sort of focus in on the detail and bring it to life and see how that is accelerated, here's just one way to do that, is to look at that chart in chunks. So you can see here, we've got the origins of Canva back in 2013, and we've got the number of MAUs rising up there and hitting 1 million after 3 years. So now let's zoom out from that. MAU, monthly active users. Sorry. It's a term so close to our hearts we forget that it's not normal language.
So this is what was so impressive last time, right? Now your head is exploding. My God, I thought I was impressed with this. Look at this already. Oh my God. Where do I send the money?
Don't send it yet. Hold on. That only takes us to 2018. You zoom out again, and now you see that the 1 has disappeared because that's just small fry on the base of the chart. And we're now 10xing that 10 million up to 100 million over the next several years. And then this is just a couple of years since. So we're talking now only about 2 years, and we've added another 85 million. So just bringing a bit of narrative excitement to this chart and stepping through it not only adds a bit of drama, but also lets you actually see the detail at a level that you wouldn't have been able to do if you just show the whole thing.
Duncan, I'm telling you, if you use the chart like that in a staff meeting, I refuse to believe that your manager is going to say, no, you cannot have the budget. I mean, it's just not possible, right? So when you have like sales going like that, or maybe if you work for a support function and you're showing the number of emails or calls coming into the call center, and oh, look what we had. I mean, we're talking Steve Jobs reality distortion here.
Okay, so another way that you can bring a basic chart to life is to play it through time. So I'll start from the beginning here in 1960. This is showing urban population of different countries in the world. And you can see the US was dominant. You can see the significant number of European countries there. And you can play that through time in what we call a racing bar chart or a bar chart race. You can see China overtaking the US, India overtaking the US, Europe basically disappearing, and really bringing that data set to life simply by playing it through time. So that's another thing you can do. Humans are kind of hardwired from our evolutionary past to track motion and movement. We can't help following things that are moving. And so with a chart like this, you could squash it into a line chart, but by playing it through time, you can hold the attention for longer, and in that sense, you can get more information across. Here's, because you said you wanted to go full Steve Jobs. So this, I just wanted to show how far you can go. This is an example I made years ago back in my days at The Guardian, which is a fun project for data storytelling generally. You can do stuff like actually fly all the world's planes and even fast forward them through time and see this amazing dance as the different continents come to life at different times of day. But the simple chart example I want to show here is this one. So this is a simple bar chart, but brought to life showing the sales of commercial aviation tickets, so passenger air tickets. And you can see we brought it to life just by giving it some visual character here. But data storytelling is also about two other things. One is giving context and annotation. So what are those kinks in the chart? So being able to bring in some little identifiers so that you can immediately see what's going on at these different pivotal moments in the history of that chart. But the reason I wanted to show this one was actually something else, which is that there's data, but stories are often actually more around multimedia. You've got the individuals involved in these data points. Each of these journeys has lots of sub-stories. So what we did here, we made it possible to hover over each individual item, and you can start to bring this story to life as an extraordinary tale of innovation and experimentation. This one of my favorites. This is 1925, one of the first ever in-flight movies. I assume no one could hear anything, given that there's apparently the engine just through that single glazing there. But it's kind of fun. That's another good one. Look, 10.5 days just to get to Australia on this plane. But again, that thing that data tells the story itself, but also data embodies all the stories that created those data points. So sometimes bringing that to life visually is a good way to go.
I once interviewed someone named David Acker, A-A-K-E-R. David Acker is the father of branding. So he really pioneered branding. And he told me, you know, Guy, never use data if you can help it. You should always use a story, because with data, there's always a counterpoint. There's always, you can argue something about, you know, it was the sampling, it was this or that, or, you know, it wasn't really relevant, or, but if you use a story, it's very hard to argue against a story. So that's why stories combined with data visualization is so powerful, because your eyes are seeing visually what your brain is hearing. So now you have two senses working for you to be influential and persuasive and foster your brand. I'm telling you, this is the way.
So next up, tell us about this one.
Well, write your own story. There are circumstances where you want to involve your audience even more, or maybe it's not an audience, maybe it's simply the recipient of your data. And you would like someone to just like take a deep dive and just kind of lose track of time and play with the data, see what you can explore and all that, to truly captivate their attention. So that's when you enable people to write your own story with the data.
Okay, so there are lots of different ways that an interactive visualization can add value and can do more. And just to emphasize again, what you're looking at here is a Canva slide deck. So although the stuff I'm showing you now is interactive, it's interactive in the deck. And I think there's an interesting thing here about changing the nature of what a presentation is. In the past, a presentation is a static output. It's almost like a video that you're just jumping through. But actually, a presentation can become an interactive thing that you can explore with the audience in real time. So here's a chart. This was one that we had on the Flourish site a while ago during the pandemic, looking at the vaccinations of the COVID pandemic. Now, of course, that's currently showing these 4 countries, but they might not be the relevant ones for us. I'm from the UK, so I'm going to add that. We're here in the US, so let's add that. Canva is from Australia, so let's add that. And what we can do is actually construct that chart in real time on the stage in the presentation. And not only that, we can then start exploring this in different ways. Maybe we want to see on a log scale to see the rate of growth. Maybe we want to look at that at a different metric. And so if you think how powerful this is, people commission surveys or bits of research, and what they get back is often a 150-page PDF that shows every single cut of that data, one after the other, as if you're going to read each one individually. But of course, only some of them are relevant. So instead, what you can do now with Canva and Flourish is you put everything into one deck, one slide, and then the audience can find their own story. Let's take another example. It's another one from Canva. So one of the things you can do with interaction is you can show a big story with an overall theme, but then you can let the user peel away the detail to uncover the other stories in that. And that can be used in a kind of theatrical way as part of a presentation, or it can be used as just something that you give to the audience to do at home. So here is an example. This is what we call a cohort chart. So in software, we always have this thing where when a user comes to your service, do they use it more and more over time, or do they drop out? It's what we call churn. And this is a real chart showing the cohorts who joined Canva. So people who joined in different years represented there in different colors. Now you can see overall this very, very steep chart of MAUs, active users, going up and up and up. But it's actually quite hard to see the individual layers there. So let's start peeling these off. We can take off the more recent layers just by clicking on the legend here. And we can start to see this pattern where, in fact, every single one of these layers displays this same funnel of getting bigger and bigger over time. And we could go right back. Obviously, the numbers are much smaller. We almost couldn't see 2013 on the chart when we showed the whole thing. It was contributing to the total. But if by peeling away the other layers, we can see that actually even the people who came in and used Canva right at the beginning have actually continued to grow as a group of people in terms of their usage and their passing on of the product to others. So that's another thing you can do is show the whole, but let people drill down to the other layers. Another thing you can do with interaction, this is maybe a little bit more bespoke. This is an example I made back in my Guardian days again, is you can personalize data. And this is like a more extreme version of the same thing, the idea that there's lots of stories in the data, but what does the individual who's looking at it actually want to know? So in this example, this was taking future temperature rise for climate change predicted by the IPCC report that had come out at the time. And then what we did is we let people enter their year of birth and then actually plotted them on the chart. So of course the data doesn't change, but the annotations do. And by bringing in that annotation, you suddenly make that chart more relevant, more interesting, and more relatable. So that personalization is a thing that is really only possible with interaction, and which you can now do in a slide deck. So those were that's the last of the, or maybe one more for good measure. This was another example from that same era, is that once you let people explore and reveal the stories in the data, you can also make them available to even share. So this one you're seeing here, this is a data set showing every single category of women's legal protections, women's rights in every country in the world, pulled together by the UN, big fat spreadsheet. And what we did is we put it into a form not only where you could see the whole thing, so you could see the relationship between the different continents and which continent has done the most, you could then drill down. Of course, everyone is from a country. If the first thing you're going to do when you see this, what about the country I'm from? So you go in, you find the country you're from, you can see those individual data points, and then you can even share them. So again, thinking about data as a platform for other people's storytelling is something that you can do with an interactive medium like this. So one thing you said to me, Guy, when we were preparing for this is all these amazing examples are kind of super impressive, but you also wanted to see some stuff that people could take home and try themselves that's starting more at the easier end.
Well, let's...
So I put this in for you. So this is just a little example that we use when we're training customers on using Flourish about the different ways that you can improve even a basic chart without doing anything fancy. And so here's a chart showing, as you can see, CO2 emissions per capita by country. There's lots of lines on it, there's lots of colors on it, there's a legend. In a sense, it kind of ticks all the boxes of being an acceptable chart because the colors are easily separable, the title is accurate, but it absolutely doesn't tell a story. And in fact, it's quite hard to read. You start trying to work out what these lines represent, and you have to refer up to the legend to try and work out which color is which. There's also several colors, so which can you even discern them from the axis, from the legend? But then also there's that question of, what do you want me to take from this chart? What is it actually telling me? So here's just a few iterations, a few really easy things that you can do to a chart like this just to bring it to life a little bit more and become more of a data storyteller. So first, let's give it a decent title. So much of good data visualization is about the text around it. If you created this chart in order to show what was going on in this blue line at the top, then you want to unapologetically paste that right up at the top. Wait. And you want to be telling the story as well, rather than just describing what it is.
Duncan, what do you think is going on in Brunei?
Well, that's a good question.
Is it all the Lamborghinis and the Mercedes G-classes?
Well, there are things, and we're going to get to that. I'm glad you asked, Guy.
Okay.
But let's start by first just trying to make this a little bit less messy. So let's move forward to strip out the legend and just directly label the lines. Suddenly, you can see at a glance that Brunei is up at the top. It's reinforced by the title, and you don't have this thing of your eyes going up and down. So this is a much more interpretable, readable chart already. But it still feels a bit messy. It still doesn't answer your question of what is going on here. So let's actually focus the audience's attention on what we're really interested in here. This chart is about Brunei. So let's just gray out all the others. If they're not the principal point of interest in the chart, they're there more as a reference, then they don't need to be individually separable. They don't need to be individually colored. By graying them out, we bring all the audience's attention onto the top line. And then just as a little bit of extra kind of signposting, we can actually color Brunei in the title as well. It's a thing you can do with the click of a button because the text matches. And that makes it really clear that when you read the title, it's referring to that blue line. And then finally, annotation. Annotation is a really, really important concept in charts and in data storytelling. So let's actually just add a couple of moments to this chart just to highlight what's actually going on. We've got the oil production peak in 2005. We've got an unusual increase in coal power and oil refinery in 2020. And suddenly, this is now a piece of visual communication. It's a chart that is telling a story that's reinforcing the message it's trying to tell, which is drawing the eye to the right area, and suddenly you can understand what's going on. So a simple example, but hopefully helps with what you were asking, Guy, about what can someone just making a simple chart do to just improve it and make it into more of a story.
I love it.
Cool, so that's the end of the examples for today. But there is going to be a book signing as well. I mean, maybe you should tell us a little bit about this book.
Yeah, so I have a podcast called Remarkable People. And I interview remarkable people, such as Melanie Perkins, Jane Goodall, Steve Wozniak, Stacey Abrams. And it's now 5 years old, and I have about 250 episodes, which is 250 hours. Because I'm deaf, there's a transcription, so there's 5,000 pages of transcriptions. But nobody's going to listen that long or read that much. So we compiled it into this book called Think Remarkable. And believe it or not, we brought enough for all of you to get a copy. So as you go out, you're going to get a copy. Yeah. So, listen, I hope you learn about the power of visualization of data and how it can impact your story. So now, you know, as you think about this, think about how you might use that in a staff meeting or pitching your company or trying to influence and persuade a decision, because it's such a powerful technique. Data visualization. Duncan Clark. Thank you very much. Thank you.